our Southwest double act. Our powerhouse MEP, ladies and gentlemen, please give an enormous welcome to William Dartmouth.
Thank you very much, Drew, thank you, Steve, and thanks everybody for coming. Now, this speech will feature some slides. Our slides are truthful, valid, accurate, to the best of our ability. But our slides probably don't have the production values of, for example, the well-known broadcaster Channel 4. Production values are, of course, one set of values, but there are other values. And as we in the UK Independence Party have consistently seen with Channel 4, and as Julia pointed out with great eloquence, Channel 4's values encompass falsehood, innuendo, smear. Now, to the European Union, the EU. We in Britain are in a relationship with the EU, and that relationship has become dependent, dysfunctional, auto-destructive. But other countries have different relationships, better relationships with their trading partners. Let's take a look at the North American Free Trade Area, which is usually known by its initials as NAFTA. In trade terms, NAFTA is approximately the same size as the EU. You can see that just over 70% of the exports of Mexico went to the two other countries in NAFTA. With Canada, the equivalent figure is almost 80%. By comparison, if you look further down the slide, with the UK and the EU, the figure is less than 45%, and that is falling. Nevertheless, we are constantly told that because maybe 45% of our exports go to the EU, that is in itself sufficient reason for the UK to be in the EU political union. As we've just seen, Canada and Mexico have a much higher proportion of their exports going to the North American Free Trade Area. Notwithstanding, no serious person puts forward this as a reason for Canada and Mexico to be in a political union with the United States. They can't even find a Miliband brother to say that. We should also note that with NAFTA, there are border posts between the United States and Canada, and there are border controls between the United States and Mexico. In the very successful trading bloc that is NAFTA, there is no free movement of people, none at all. The fact is, you can trade and trade successfully without free movement, which in reality is a right of permanent settlement. And it's a pity that our British Prime Minister thinks and says something different. Now, to the European Union and trade. The essential background is that the UK has been a leader in international trade for centuries, long before the European Union was even thought of. Now I'm going to go to my next slide here. This slide shows the value of trade between 20 countries outside the EU and the EU member states in 2013. You will note, perhaps, the sheer value of this trade. 2,593 billion euros. To emphasize, in 2013, the value of this trade was worth more than the entire economy of France. For that matter, it was worth more than the entire economy of here in the UK. And indeed, it was even worth more than what Tony Blair was paid last year. It's also important to note that 6 of the top 10, indeed 11 of the top 20 trading countries do not have trade agreements with the EU. These countries trade with the EU within the framework and under the rules of the World Trade Organization. And that is one option for the UK after exit, and one option that is always available. The EU cannot block it. Now, next point. Many will assume that a member state of the European Union will inevitably export more per head of population than a country which is not a member state. Let's take a look at Switzerland, which, to be clear, is not a member of the EU. As the slide shows, Switzerland has consistently exported to the EU a multiple per head of that which we manage in the UK. The average is over 4.5 times. And by the way, all this trade takes place between the EU and Switzerland without any retainers being paid to Mr. Jack Straw or Sir Malcolm Rivkin. The point is this: a country does not have to be in the European Union in order to be able to trade with it and to trade very successfully. We would absolutely not be leaving EU markets when we exit the EU. Again, it is crystal clear the trade would continue. That all trade would cease is not a tenable proposition. The facts are clear. It is just not true. And it follows that the myth of the 3 million jobs to be lost is not only a myth, it is a deliberate deceit on the electors of our country. And it remains a deliberate deceit even when it is the leader of the opposition, let alone the leader of the Liberal Democrats, who says it. Our membership of the European Union is also justified on the basis of what they call influence. Now let's look at the facts. First, EU commissioners. Here's a slide, though I'm not sure that we need it. The facts are that the UK originally appointed 2 commissioners out of 13. We now appoint just 1 of 28. For the mathematically minded, the percentage of UK appointed commissioners has gone down to just 3.6%. And of course, when the Prime Minister appointed his SPAD crony, Lord Hill, also known as Lord Who, as the UK's commissioner, our commissioner isn't worth 3.6%. It's more like 0.6%, and even that's on a good day. Second, let's take a look at MEPs from the UK. We used to have 19.8% in 1979. Now it's less than half that. Third, and finally, let's look at the UK's vote in the Council of Ministers. It used to be 17%. It also is now less than half that. The UK has tried to block proposals from the EU Commission in the Council 55 times in the last 5 years. And I'm sure we're all wondering how many of those 55 proposals from the EU Commission that affect the UK that the UK has actually succeeded in blocking. Is it perhaps 35 of the 55? No. Is it 25 of the 55? No. Surely it must be at least 10 of the 55. I'm afraid not. The answer is none. Niente. Zero. Zilch. Nil. The fact of the matter is that the chant of influence, influence, influence that one hears all the time from Europhile politicians and their hangers-on in the media has absolutely no basis in reality at all. We have no meaningful influence with the EU. Each new member state dilutes our influence. But bizarrely, and against our national interest, the 3 establishment parties are all cheerleaders for yet more countries to join the EU. They even want Turkey, with its population of up to 80 million. And by the way, if Turkey does join the EU, if David Cameron and Miliband and Mr. Clegg get their way, the UK would then have borders with Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Back to trade. When we exit the EU, we regain our ability to negotiate our own trade agreements for ourselves. To go back also to Switzerland, a country with an economy 1/4 the size of the UK's, Switzerland negotiates its own trade agreements, and this next slide shows how Switzerland has done. You can see the EU has trade agreements which Switzerland does not, with Algeria, Andorra, San Marino. Switzerland has trade agreements which the EU does not, with Canada, China, and Japan. It's not just Switzerland. Chile, New Zealand, Iceland, amongst other countries, unlike the UK, which is in the EU, can negotiate their own trade agreements. We cannot, so long as we remain in the EU. And Chile, New Zealand, even Iceland, all have trade agreements with China. By comparison, the EU does not, will not anytime soon, and in consequence, the UK does not. On trade, it is crystal clear, indeed, as with everything else, that UK exit is the best way forward for the future of our country. But that's the future. At the present time, our commerce, business, and industries are hampered by alien regulation. Our English common law is made inferior to the rulings of foreign courts. Our National Health Service is hobbled by EU directive. Our people can be subjected to the European arrest warrant. Our fish are stolen. We cannot even choose what vacuum cleaners we use, how cider is taxed, or the voltage in our ovens. The European Commission extends its sway over us, even unto light bulbs. Shimon Peres once said, "People age, dreams are ageless." And we in UKIP have a dream, and our dream is of an independent country that is not a province in a protectionist European superstate. That is international and outward-looking, that can make its own choices, that controls its own borders, that has an ethical policy on immigration, that is self-confident, and above all, believes in itself. We believe in Britain. That is above all what we in UKIP stand for. And Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.